I didn't notice him leaving at first. That's the truth I struggle with the most. Not that he left, but that he did it quietly enough for me to miss the moment it began. Marriage had made me careless. Not cruel. Not unfaithful. Just certain. Certain that arguments were temporary. Certain that distance was a phase. Certain that whatever tension existed between us would eventually settle the way it always had. Because marriage, I believed, meant permanence. It meant staying, even when things felt uncomfortable. It meant working through silence instead of walking away from it. At least, that's what I told myself. The first sign wasn't dramatic. There was no slammed door, no raised voice, no accusation waiting for me when I came home. It was the absence of something I couldn't name yet. He still lived in the house, still slept beside me, still said good morning and drive safe and did you eat. But those words had lost their weight. They were polite now, careful, like he was speaking to someone he no longer wanted to disturb. One night, as we lay in bed facing opposite directions, I realized I couldn't remember the last time he had asked me a real question. Not how was your day, but the kind that requires listening, the kind that invites closeness. That realization unsettled me more than anger would have. Because anger would have meant I could respond, defend myself, explain. Silence didn't give me that. I tried to convince myself it was stress, work, fatigue, the normal erosion that comes with routine. But deep down, I knew this wasn't erosion. It was a decision. I started paying attention in ways I hadn't before. The way he folded his clothes and placed them neatly on his side of the dresser, never crossing into mine anymore. The way he stopped reaching for my hand in the car, not abruptly, not obviously, just gradually, until one day I noticed my fingers resting alone on the console. The way his phone stayed in his pocket more often, not because he was hiding anything, but because he no longer felt the need to share. Trust hadn't been shattered. It had been withdrawn. And withdrawal doesn't make noise. I told myself I should ask him what was wrong. But every time I opened my mouth, I hesitated. Because asking would have meant admitting that something fundamental had shifted, and I wasn't ready to face what that might mean. Marriage had given me a false sense of security. I thought vows were anchors. I thought commitment meant endurance. I thought love, once formalized, became immune to quiet exits. I didn't realize how wrong I was. The night everything changed wasn't marked by a fight. We were sitting at the kitchen table, eating dinner in near silence. The overhead light buzzed faintly. The clock ticked too loudly. I reached for his glass to refill it out of habit. He moved it away gently. "I've got it," he said. His voice wasn't sharp. It was final. Something in my chest tightened. Not because of what he said, but because of how little emotion it carried. That was when I realized something worse than anger had replaced him. Anger is loud. Anger demands answers. Anger still wants engagement. What I was seeing now was restraint. And restraint comes from distance. I wanted to say something then, to bridge the gap before it grew wider. Instead, I nodded. Because even I could feel how fragile the moment was, and how easily one wrong sentence could push him further away. That night I lay awake listening to his breathing, steady and even. I wondered if he was asleep or just pretending. I wondered how long he had been this far from me, while lying inches away. I replayed the last few months in my head, searching for the moment I might have crossed a line I hadn't seen at the time. But the truth was harder to face. There wasn't one moment. There were many small ones. Moments of complacency. Moments of assumption. Moments where I chose comfort over effort because I believed he was bound to me. Marriage had made me lazy with his presence. I stopped noticing his silences until they became habits. Stopped asking about his thoughts until he stopped offering them. Stopped checking in because I assumed he would always be there to check back. One evening, unable to bear the distance anymore, I tested it. "You've been quiet lately," I said, keeping my voice neutral. He didn't look surprised. Didn't deny it. Didn't ask why I thought that. He simply nodded. "I know," he said. That was all. No explanation. No reassurance. No invitation to continue. The conversation ended before it began. And I sat there, stunned by how easily he had closed the door without slamming it. That was when fear finally settled in. Not fear of losing him, but fear that I already had. I realized then that marriage hadn't guaranteed his presence. It had only guaranteed that he would try, until he decided not to anymore. I watched him move through our shared life with careful efficiency after that. Still kind, still respectful, still present in all the ways that didn't require vulnerability. But the emotional risk was gone. And once someone removes emotional risk from a relationship, the ending has already started. I didn't know yet whether he had seen something, heard something, or simply felt something shift beyond repair. What I knew was this: he was no longer fighting to stay. And I had mistaken that fight for permanence. The silence between us grew heavier, thicker, harder to navigate. And for the first time since we said "I do," I understood something terrifying. Marriage doesn't make someone stay. It just makes leaving quieter. And once silence takes its place, there are no words powerful enough to bring someone back who has already chosen distance over discussion. After that night, I stopped expecting things to return to normal. I didn't announce that decision. I didn't consciously make it. It simply settled into me, the way you accept bad weather when there's nowhere left to run. Normal had already passed us by. I started measuring time differently, not by days or weeks, but by what disappeared next. He stopped sitting beside me on the couch, not dramatically, just a cushion of space that stayed empty as if it belonged to something else now. He stopped telling me about his thoughts before bed, the quiet conversations we used to have in the dark about nothing important and everything meaningful never came back. He still listened when I spoke. That was the part that confused me the most. He nodded, responded politely, offered practical solutions when I mentioned problems, but he no longer shared himself in return. It was like living with someone who had already finished grieving, while I was just beginning to realize something was gone. I wanted to ask him what had changed, but every time the question rose in my throat, I swallowed it. Because asking would have meant acknowledging the risk. And I could feel, without him ever saying it, that he was done taking risks with me. One morning, as we stood in the kitchen drinking coffee, I noticed he was dressed differently, more deliberate, more contained. Not to impress anyone, to protect himself. I watched him tie his shoes, methodical and calm, and felt something twist inside me. That was when I understood something else I hadn't allowed myself to see before. He wasn't pulling away because he was angry. He was pulling away because he had accepted something I hadn't. I tried to reinsert myself into his world in small, harmless ways. A touch on his arm when he passed by. A question about his plans for the weekend. An invitation to sit together instead of apart. He never rejected me. That would have been easier. Instead, he allowed just enough closeness to remain polite. Nothing more. That kind of restraint does something to you. It makes you doubt your right to ask for more. It makes you second-guess your own needs. It makes you feel like the unreasonable one for wanting intimacy back. I began to understand that silence isn't empty. It's intentional. It communicates boundaries without explaining them. One night, unable to hold it in anymore, I said quietly, "Do you still want to be here?" The question hung between us. He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. "I'm here," he said. "Not with you. Just here." That distinction landed heavier than any argument ever could have. Because presence without connection is a kind of absence. After that, I stopped testing the space between us. I stopped trying to pull him back toward me. I started watching instead. Watching the way he planned his days without including me. The way he spoke about the future without using we. The way his eyes no longer searched my face when something mattered. I realized then that he had already made peace with an ending I was still resisting. Weeks passed. Then months. We existed in a strange in-between, married in name, separated in spirit. Eventually, practicality demanded conversation. Not about feelings, about logistics, about timing, about what made sense. The conversation everyone expects to be emotional was. It was calm, efficient, careful, and throughout it all he never asked. Not about what I'd done. Not about what he might have seen. Not about whether there was more he didn't know. That was when it finally became clear. He didn't need answers. Because answers wouldn't change how he felt. Knowing more wouldn't make him trust again. And trust, once withdrawn, doesn't negotiate its return. When he moved out, it happened quietly. No suitcases thrown into the car. No tears in the doorway. He hugged me, thanked me for the years we shared, and wished me well. I stood there watching him leave, struck by the cruelest realization of all. The man I had believed marriage would secure had walked away without needing to explain himself. Because marriage doesn't obligate someone to stay when emotional safety is gone. It only delays the moment they decide to leave. I spent a long time replaying everything afterward, looking for a moment where I could have done something differently, said something sooner, listened more closely. But the truth was harder to accept. I hadn't lost him in a single moment. I had lost him slowly, by assuming permanence where effort was required, by believing a commitment on paper could replace the daily work of presence, by thinking marriage meant he couldn't leave. Silence taught me what arguments never could. That love doesn't always end in noise. Sometimes it ends in restraint. Sometimes it ends when someone decides not to fight anymore. And when that happens, no explanation will bring them back. Because the most devastating consequence isn't being yelled at. It's being released. Quietly. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever felt someone leave without raising their voice, take a moment to like this video. If you want more stories where the damage isn't loud, where silence does the talking, subscribe. And if you've ever mistaken permanence for security, share your thoughts in the comments. Some lessons arrive quietly, but they stay forever.